Welcome back to the further adventures of the monad. In the last series of presentations, we discussed each envelope of incarnation and came to understand how they collectively amounted to a first self. We then followed the creation and dissolution of each of these envelopes as a monad cycles through repeated incarnations. We also came to learn that our personas have no significance beyond the incarnation they function in. I wish to illustrate this from a personal perspective. My mother has finished her incarnation. What does this mean to me? Effectively, she is no longer my mother. The monad that just happened to be incarnating in a female body and was therefore capable of giving me a pathway into incarnation, I called my mother. I may be karmically linked to this monad in myriads of ways, as a son, as a father, as a husband, as a sister, or a friend. This monad may have been a mother to me before, and may be so again. But that persona that was my mother in my present incarnation no longer exists. What exists are the lessons learnt from our interactions. Take some time to think about this. It may be unsettling for some. They may be looking forward to passing over themselves and reuniting with their loved ones. If this is the case, how does this scenario manifest? This is going to form the basis for today's presentation. I hope it is apparent to you by now that every plane of matter is a reality in itself. When the monad is focused there, everything that occurs is experienced objectively. If the monad is not focused on that plane, but the one below it, there is still a possibility to experience the higher plane. But this now becomes a subjective experience. It is occurring in our minds. Does this make such an event pointless? Far from it. It is the very fact that we can subjectively view half a plane of matter ahead of where we are currently objectively focused that drives the whole process of evolution. The monad comes to realize where it wishes and needs to go, and gets drawn inexorably towards it. This is part of the law of attraction. Remember those laws? Each plane of matter has 7 subplanes. Our monad resides in the permanent atom or molecule on one of these planes, but is objectively focused on one of the subplanes. As its consciousness expands, its focus extends to higher and higher subplanes until it eventually changes its location from one permanent structure to another. This is called initiation, and we take 3 of them as we pass through the 4th kingdom of nature. Initiation. Now there's an interesting topic for another presentation. What I wish to concentrate on now is what happens to our envelopes as we go through the process of dissolving them and returning to our causal body. In other words, what happens when we die? Let's start with the disconnection of our life thread. This immediately stops our physical heart. The battery has been removed from the rabbit. Poor rabbit. Actually, forget the rabbit. It is just a stuffed toy. Time to donate it to medical science and move on. We find ourselves suddenly conscious in our etheric body. This, for most of us, is not somewhere we have been objectively focused before, but we are seemingly conscious and floating above our rabbit, rather than looking at the world from within this toy. How weird. Now, let's assume we are going to hang around because we are so enamored with our rabbit that we just can't bring ourselves to leave it. But let's think positively. We are going to leave it. If this is the case, we come to a wall of light, and we are minded to stick our heads through this curtain of light. What do we find there? We find paradise. Well, at least I hope we do. This may not actually be the case for some of us. So let's look back and remind ourselves about the structure of the emotional world. It exists on 7 subplanes, 6 of which are potentially accessible to us as human monads. The lowest 3, 47.7 to 47.5, are what theologians called euphemistically hell. Hang on a minute, I thought we were heading for paradise. Some of us are, but others have a bit of house cleaning to do. You see, when you pass from the etheric plane into the emotional plane, you regain consciousness where your monad was focused during your incarnation. Now, if that happened to be in one of those lower 3 emotional subplanes, then that is where you are heading. If your life was full of hate, distrust, despair, and anger, subplane 48.7 awaits you. When you get there, what happens next? Remember, I said the emotional world is what you want it to be. It is a world of fantasy and illusions. If you fear others, then others will appear out of the mists and do unto you what you fear most. Nothing, of course, is happening, but you think it is, and it must be a pretty miserable existence. Once you rid yourself of your negative emotions, you begin to float into the higher subplanes, shedding the negativities that are commensurate with this subplane. While you are locked in your emotional straitjacket, you may be visited by another monad who has tasked themselves to come and work with you and suggest ways you could improve your situation. This is something that is often reported by writers on the subject of death and its ramifications. Are they correct? It is difficult to say. If they were viewing the scene clairvoyantly, remember, they are in a world of illusions, so are they just seeing what they think is likely to happen? I leave you to ponder that thought. What the hierarchy has informed us is that we are the authors of our own happiness or misery. On the emotional plane, this becomes apparent in very graphic terms. Let's assume that our hapless monad has made it out of these 3 lower subplanes. It can only do this if it was actually focused here originally. Oh yes, you may be focused on plane 48.4, but if your life and emotions were full of hate and distrust, you are going to spend some time reflecting on what that really means. This is what the Catholic Church meant esoterically when it talked about hell, 48.7, and purgatory, 48.6 and 48.5. This is where you get blowtorched by Beelzebub until you agree to give more generously to the Catholic Church in your next incarnation. What can we deduce from these 3 subplanes called hell and purgatory? They are closely aligned to the 3 lowest subplanes of our world, 49.5 to 49.7. After all, it is in these subplanes here on Earth that we truly come to know what hell is. When we get to the sister emotional subplanes, we meet all our unresolved emotions, except they are magnified 100-fold. Why? Because they are no longer dampened by the pressure of our denser physical body. That body has gone, and all we are left with are our raw emotions. This is my advice to you. If you wish to hang on to any emotions, make sure they are pleasant ones, because when you meet them again, you want them to be on subplanes 48.4 and higher. If your monad was focused in one of the 3 lowest emotional subplanes, you are going to just have to lap up what fate gives you. And when you have dispensed with all your sordid emotions, you move onto the mental plane for the next thrilling installment. I will get to that transition later. If you notice on our original diagram, the etheric and then the emotional envelopes are represented by broken lines around them. This is because these envelopes dissolve. The tertiary matter that comprises the envelope itself and the secondary matter contained within them are released back into the general pool of matter found on the subplanes where that matter comes from. This happens naturally because the life thread that animates all our envelopes is withdrawing into the next higher envelope. This decay process does not happen immediately, and this is one of the reasons that we see ghosts on dark, misty nights, especially in graveyards. Guess why? Because the physical organism is rotting away in the coffin, and the disorientated etheric hangs around where it used to be. Only now, as it is not receiving any energy, it becomes hag-like, and hence all the representations we see of poltergeists. There are other variations of what could be animating a poltergeist. If you wish to learn more, one of my previous presentations deals with this. The same happens on the emotional plane when the monad moves on from the 48th to the 47th plane of matter. The emotional envelope begins to disintegrate. However, again, this envelope can be animated by your wishes if you want to see your mother. The monad that inhabited this envelope may have moved onto the mental plane, but the tertiary molecules that made up this envelope are happy to give a sterling performance as your mother. After all, they spent a lifetime containing her emotions. Well, we have reached my allotted time, and we have only just made it out of hell and purgatory, and not even entered paradise. That is for the next presentation. Thank you.